Okay, so I picked up from Northern Tool this hand winch truck crane, and in this video I'm going to work on installing it. I call these. So take a look at it. I've already taken the straps off the dock. Looks like a pretty heavy duty piece of equipment, much more heavy duty than my truck bed. So I'm going to do some reinforcements, which I'm going to talk about in a second. Okay, so I'm underneath the vehicle and I'm trying to figure out where to affix the the crane to, or the hoist to. And I have this fairly heavy beam right here, which is the very back edge of the pickup truck. And then I also have this support up here, which doesn't look quite as sturdy, but it's probably the best we have. To do anything beyond that, I would then have to actually add additional steel and reinforce it against the main frame here. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a couple of bars across the top. I'm going to I'm going to drill some holes through, connect the bar to this beam in the back here, and to this beam and then to the very back of this this frame here. I'm also, since this metal is fairly thin, I'm going to reinforce it with some 1/4-inch stainless steel plates. And I don't think I'll get to the point where I would feel comfortable picking up a full 500 pounds with a crane or with a hoist, but I think this could be good enough for most of the things that I would use it for. So these support brackets right here came with the kit, but if you measure them, they're 15.5 inches long, which really isn't long enough to go from across those supports. So what I'm going to do is I went ahead and bought a 4-foot long piece of 2x3 1/4-inch, and I am going to cut this in half, which is two 24-inch pieces, which means they'll go about this far to the front to back. I'm actually going to lay them on top of these two ridges here, and then I will drill through both the back here, which will hold both the part of the post, and then here, which is pretty over no metal, but then also up here, and then run bolts through the support that's up here, and run bolts through the support. So you'll see what I'm talking about here in just a minute. So I bought 1/4-inch thick steel for my cross beams, but the reality of it is I probably overdid it. I imagine 3/16 would have been adequate, maybe even an 8. I don't know. But better to go. Better to overdo it than underdo it. As I say, there's an old saying: if you over-engineer something, you and God know. Whereas if you under-engineer it, everybody knows. Okay, so I got it laid out where I'm going to put the supports on the top. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill holes all the way through here, and this is right at 2 inches from the back of the truck. So I'm going to put a hole through here, 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 and here. These two will have the backing plate, and I'll show the letter, the 3-inch stainless steel 1/4-inch backing plate that's a foot long beneath it. But then on top of it, over here, not. But then again, I'm going to put 2 more holes up here through the same support that the bed bolts into right there. So we're hitting this support across here that this bolt bolts into, and we're hitting this support right here at the end that this bolt actually bolts into. So we'll see how that works out. As a sanity check, I drilled a hole that was 2 1/4 inches in from the edge here, and looked at it underneath, and it was right where I wanted it to be. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drill my first hole, then I'll put a bolt through it, and then do each hole, through the. So I got the first bolt here through on the top. How it's all set up, and I'm just going to put the nut on the bottom underneath it, somewhat loose, just to kind of hold it in place. You can kind of see that the nut is back up in there. So I'm going to go ahead and just finger tight the nut onto it for the time being. Okay, so I've drilled the 4 holes, and I just stuck the bolts through them just to kind of, just to position into place. So the last part is I have to drill a couple of holes for this end, where we're going to, and just to figure out exactly where that beam is, to get a reference point. You can see my little drill bit is fitting up right through there. What I did is I just, from underneath the truck, I just drilled a bit, about, you know, about an inch off the edge of this, but I just want to make sure I'm aligned. Now I got the bolt mount that's over here, but I wasn't sure if that was going to be centered with this part of it. So just to play safe. So you won't have to do this. I'll tell you what the actual measurement is. But this is just how I'm figuring that. Because what I'm going to do is then drill 2 holes through there, one here and there, or wherever they end up. Put a metal plate on it, and that metal plate is what's going to, you know, what's going to be the backing on this part of this beam. Because I don't want to, you know, if I just put a washer here, it might contort it some, since this is not the biggest or the thickest metal. So I want to try to get the most strength as I can out of it. So there's my center line post. Just line this up. It actually looks like it's perfectly aligned with the actual mount of the bolt itself, which actually doesn't surprise me. That's what you kind of would expect. So I just didn't know if this was a little bit off center right here. I now know that it is alignment like you know, like you would expect it to be. So I'll go ahead and just draw a line across there. And then the measurement from the center of this hole right here to the line right here looks to be right at about 11 3/16. Do a sanity check here. And I'm sorry, I meant 11 3. It looks like about 11 3/8. And let's see, we'll call it 11 3/8. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to then measure from here. I'm going to measure 11 3/8 this way, and then drill another hole, and that will be the top mount hole for this for the support through that beam. And that hole will have to go all the way through the whole beam. So I purchased some long 3/8" bolts just for that. So this is going to be the backing plate. I'm going to put this underneath. So it's going to be the back side of this. It's like a big washer, but it's going to provide extra support, you know, to the beam because the metal's somewhat thin. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a center line. This is 3 inches thick. So I'm going to have, let's see, half. And then it's going to go ahead and use this as a template for it. I guess I could probably measure it also, would probably also work, but either way probably is fine. Use this as a template for how the holes are going to be. Is that about right? See, that's about 2 1/4 on that side. About 2 1/4 on that side. So, these are apart. These are actually right at, I go edge to edge, that's right at 4 3/4. That's probably a more accurate way than just drawing circles in there. On the center line, this is just under 12, so this center line is right here, and it's a total of 4, what did I say, 4 3/4, so 2 3/8 that way. I'm going to say 4 3/4, this is 4 3/4, at the starting point. So I'm going to drill my holes for this piece of stainless steel that's going to be the backing. since I got to paint this, this is, you know, carbon steel and rust, but I'm gonna go ahead and wash it down with mineral spirits and paint it up before I and then, you know, actually assemble everything another day. I still got 2 more holes to drill. Once I have all this in place, I'll drill the last holes through the bed, you know, up over here where we measured it out. I did drill the holes into steel, and I'm going to put smaller bolts on this one. But then paint it up, and then I'll be able to finish up this video. Got a little mineral spirits here. If you've got any oil on the back here, and you know, I put oil on it when I'm drilling the holes, and also cutting the you know, the ends. But if you have any oil on it when you paint it, you know, the paint won't stick. Okay, to compensate for the ridges, and the ridge from the top of here down to level, it's about 1/4 inch. So I ended up buying a piece of 1 foot by 4 inches by 1/4 inch thick steel plating here, and this will also be a good foundation, because when you add up the weight of whatever the hoist is going to be lifting, along with the added pressure from the torque, and I'll actually do a torque calculation a little bit later, but you know, having a good plate here is only going to help it. So I'm going to have that, then the bars that go along here, do that on both sides here. And then, let's see, another bar over here. And then, this will go right on top of here. And you remember, you know, I got these bolts here, but the reality of it is, these bolts aren't going to really have much stress on them, because they're just going through the truck bed, the thin metal here. So the real support is going to come from these 2 that are going through the beam that's right here, and these 2 bolts that are going through the beam where, you know, this anchor point is. So the same struts that I anchor the bed is what I'm primarily going to count on to maintain the strength or the integrity of the post here. So we'll put that here, and drop some bolts on through. A little bit of a tight fit. It's hard to make those things perfect. Got that down in there. Got a bolt here, and then one here. So, and then on the back side, at least the back side of these 2 bolts, have this metal plate right here. And I'll give you a camera angle of that once I kind of get that into place. Okay, so I put together the 4 bolts here, you know, through this main post, but the reality of it is that there's strength here because it's going into a structure here, but really these bolts are going through just to the thin metal. So I did end up, then I drilled the 2 holes, or actually the 2 holes were already in the what do you call it, the angle iron. So then I went ahead and drilled on through the bed into the you know, into this cross structure right here, and then I'm going to, on the bottom side, put a plate with the 2 bolts. Okay, so underneath here, this is, you know, the very back bumper area. You can see that I put the 3-inch by 12-inch by 3/16 plate steel just on the bottom for this support structure, and you got the 2 bolts here. I was barely able to get the bolts connected. It was barely long enough, but it managed. And then those are the 2 bolts that are just through the bottom of the bed. And then where I drilled the hole towards the front a little bit, you can see the 2 holes, that structure too. So I'm going to go put another piece of plate metal across that, and then bolt that in, and then I'll consider the mounting complete. Okay, you can see I finished it up, and across the top of that particular beam, you know, I put a piece of plate, and that just to spread out the load a little bit across it, since I don't really know how strong that metal is. So I don't know how much this could actually lift. I don't have the specs, but it's definitely sturdier than if it, you know, if I just pulled it through to the bottom by putting it, you know, by connecting to these supports for the truck bed. Okay, on this rainy day, I'm using the crane to lift off my motor. And this motor weighs about 300 pounds, and I got it at the 700 pound mark, so I got it extended a little bit. And you can see ever so slightly tilt on the shaft when it's to the side. So I doubt I would go with the full 700 pound weight rating on this. So let's see how this works. Lift it up and then put it in my trailer here to the left, I think. All right.